Hey, what's going on, everybody? It's Curtis Mack in the 525 studio. Happy to be hosting the Sound Strategies podcast series with DJ 525. This series will focus on industries and we'll speak to professionals from those industries. And speaking of professionals, DJ 525, you want to introduce yourself?
Hey guys, it's DJ 525. I've been in the industry of DJing for over 15 years, party planning, event hosting, DJing, and AV video production. I'm so glad to be here. Really looking forward to really just diving into all the topics and all the discussions. So thank you guys for joining us.
Yeah, shout out to Omni Productions. And for me, anybody that doesn't know, my name is Curtis Mack. I'm a multi-channel media producer from Northwest New Jersey. I've been in the commercial advertising industry for about 10 years now and host a podcast with Curtis Mack for just about the same. And as of recently, published artist. Now, I was published back in the day in college, but now I have my own children's book out, so that's awesome. What have you been up to?
Lately, I've been really focused on actually more production and content, podcasts, music, live shows, things of that nature. So I've been trying to just transition a little bit from the DJ aspect and more into the media world.
Sure. And speaking of media, on my end, there's been so much coverage with all the school closings in New Jersey with all the school funding, the S2 formula, the Highlands Act. There's a lot of media coverage that happens there as well. So I've been super busy. Everybody is involved with the schools.
Yeah, that's really great. You know, being involved with the schools really matters, being tied into the community and all of those issues and just trying to fight for just causes. For sure. For CM Productions, things are going as usual, multi-channel marketing solutions for small businesses. And as I mentioned, I'm now a published artist and author. Used to do some stuff back in college, but now Mr. Mack and the 13 Zodiacs is out, my children's book, so check it out when you get a chance. And if you need any media production or marketing work, you could either visit Omni Productions or CM Productions. Anything new going on for you? I know you're doing some licensing, right? Yeah, I'm doing some licensing as far as getting licenses in my professional career. That's been something that I'm very passionate about, getting my state licensing for wastewater treatment, because that's what I do during the day. I'm studying to be a wastewater engineer. So obtaining those licenses for the state and being up to par and be certified, as far as the DP, EPA go, as far as taking care of the natural waterways in New Jersey.
100%. And the same actually goes for me. I'm a teacher during the day, and then in the afternoon I moonlight with CM Productions, and the hoops that one has to jump through to get some license. I've recently obtained some new licensing, interactive media and merchandising and buying, and I'm sure these licenses aren't easy to obtain, right?
No, licenses are extensive. Just everything with state of New Jersey, they definitely take pride in making sure that you get trained and you learn the things that you have to learn. So the licensing process, in my case, can take up to 7 to 10 years to be fully licensed.
Yeah, and there's a lot of box checking. In my case, it's a little shorter. It's about half a decade. You start your process, and you spend about 2 or 3 years doing what you got to do, and then they give you some wiggle room in between. But more or less, they want to make sure that they're putting the right people in the right places, the state.
No, definitely, for sure. Being prepared and being able to be certified is definitely not easy, but it's definitely worth the journey.
Now, let's talk about the new podcast, Sound Strategies with DJ 525 and Curtis Mack. Speaking of licenses and professionals, the goal here is to interview industry professionals, get real-life scenarios, real-life experiences that we can share with the public.
Definitely. Being able to share our experiences, being able to talk to professionals that are out there dealing with clients, dealing with, specific industries has always been something that, me and Curtis have always been passionate about. And being able to take both of our companies and put it together in a platform like this, and then giving a spotlight to other individuals in other industries is just very needed in this area and just needed in general in business. So being able to have a platform like this just really helps everybody grow and, like each one teach one. So we're able to pass down, some jewels. We're able to pass down some enlightening material and information to people that may or may not have known things. So I'm looking forward to being able to sit down with professionals. Curtis is also looking to sit down with professionals and just talk and discuss and have ideas and share success stories, what worked, what didn't work, those type of behind the scenes. In the world of social media, everything tends to be some guru or something like that. But here, it's just going to be actual real life individuals.
Yeah, I like that. Being in the industry for X amount of years, and same as me, you providing entertainment and me providing marketing services, you learn a lot and you see a lot, and you will see what people are lacking, and you see what they're doing right, what they're doing wrong, and you wish you can, have a playbook that says here's what's to do for everybody. But everybody's custom, everybody's industry is different. All the marketing channels that are out there, they can be used, but they just have to be used properly.
Being able to deliver those marketables, being able to take that information and what and being able to break it down in bite-sized pieces that people can digest. So, overload it with jargon and definitions, and it's just a person talking to another person. That's what we want to do here. We want to break down those barriers, break down those levels of people feeling, uncomfortable or unsure. Because when you talk to someone, you're talking, big numbers and definitions and long sentences, they're kind of like, you just lost me. But here we're able to just take this and just say, hey, Pete does, bookkeeping, and Pete does this or he does that, and he's your neighbor. He's from your community. He's from your area. He lives down the block. He coaches your son's softball team or whatever the case is. This guy has a legitimate business, is, a small business, is local, has an area that he's been an expert in for a number of years.
Sure.
And just wants to pass down that information and be able to share it and reach people where they are, which is on their phones. Everything lives in a digital world, on your phone, in the privacy of your own home, or in the convenience of your pocket. So this is what we're trying to do and establish, just giving individuals a chance to have a platform to really just reach people on a really just one-to-one, down-to-earth, basis.
I don't think everybody has the resources, infrastructure, talent, or skills to maybe host their own podcast or do their own video production. So what we're doing here is we're allowing, some individuals, some professionals to hop in our studio, right? Whether it's your studio or my studio, to kind of tell their story and share their experiences. I say this, I'm a 90s kid. I'm not a kid anymore, but I'm a 90s kid. And for me, if I have a problem, I go and I like to speak to somebody. Hey, you did this in the 70s. What was your outcome? Hey, you did this then. What is your opinion? Rather than Googling it. And, Google was definitely, or these search engines were reliable for about maybe 2 decades. But now that AI is out, you got to question everything. And I saw online that people might be circling back to humans as resources, human resources for information. It's like, wow, what a concept. For a little bit, let's say from 2000 to 2026, if you talk to people and you try to get regular information out of them, not everybody is as social as they used to be prior to, the 2000s. So it's like, oh, well, just Google it. It's like, I asked you, right? So I want to know from somebody that's been in it, because same thing with your car brakes. Oh, my car's making this noise. You're going to get a million answers on the internet of what could be wrong versus having a mechanic look at it directly and saying, this is the actual issue. I think there's a lot of time wasted with information seeking, Five.
No, there is. Having that access to someone just to be able to talk to directly and being able to get a straight, clear-cut answer is becoming harder and harder to do with this whole information age and social media age. Essentially, our podcast eventually will maybe evolve into some sort of maybe directory where we do have local community, professionals that, we know that we trust can be a reliable resource. Will definitely allow us to highlight, businesses. And everything right now is going up so much with the inflation and the price of everything going up with gas and groceries, and being able to have a person that locally that, is community-based, that might share some of the same beliefs, ideals, and things of you that, like I said, lives in your neighborhood. These businesses have struggled, through recessions and struggled through COVID and all of these things as of late, So being able to give them this platform is really important and really necessary for, the future of business in New Jersey.
I 100% agree. And for someone, whether they're on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, LinkedIn, Snapchat, Twitter, YouTube, you name it, we're there, right? So we're there. We're on all streaming platforms. But for someone to be able to get a little sample or get acclimated to the person that they may do business with prior to doing business with them, I mean, that's invaluable, right? You can't even put a number on that. Hey, I need a new accountant. Well, check out that podcast and, see if you like him. And if you don't, that's fine, right? But if you do, now you can listen and you can see how that person operates. You can see their mannerisms, their vernaculars, how they deliver, right? These certain things, there's psychology into it. There's sociology into it. If you can have a little introduction to that person prior to knowing them, that's great. I always said, Five, I wish everyone had like a Myers-Briggs notification above their head that shows their personality types, right? How great would that be?
Definitely. Two guys that have been in our industries for a while, just trying to give back to other industries.
Five, I want to go over some topics with you that we'll be discussing in the future, and we may have some potential candidates. Well, we definitely will have some candidates, but maybe some people that are interested in talking about these following topics. So here's some things that we're going to discuss in the Sound Strategies podcast moving forward. We're going to talk about taxes, Five. We're going to talk about taxes, how to do them, when to do them, what's right, what's wrong, anything that comes along with taxes. And we'll try to talk to an accountant out there. If we could find an accountant to join us in the studio, we would love that.
I think taxes is definitely there. Everybody should have some idea of what your finances are. You know, with everybody trying to save money and get the best value or bang for your buck. If you're not doing that yourself and finding out what you're making and what you're spending, how are you able to do that for the clients that you're trying to provide services for? So I think that, having an expert here to come break down numbers, break down some really good practices as far as, you know, how you should prepare for tax season and what things you should be looking out for. I think that's invaluable information that, you know, you can't get everywhere.
Sure.
So having a tax professional here is definitely going to be very helpful to a lot of clients, I feel like.
Events. And this is your world, this is my world. But if we could talk to an event planner or an event coordinator to see it from their perspective, because I have it from the marketing perspective, you have it from the entertainment perspective, but we may not know or see what the planner sees, right? So if there's an event planner out there, we want to talk to you.
This is my area of expertise. I've been doing them for a long time. Done everything from bar mitzvahs to, you know, corporate events. And, you know, those are two different type of events, you know. And being able to accommodate large groups of people and also very small, intimate settings, you know, that very much matters. So, yeah, let's talk about events. Let's do it.
Yeah, and I think there's an industry standard for every event that people should follow, or venue owners or whomever's hosting the event. There's a certain, let's say, like a checklist that, you know, they should be hitting every mark. You ever see a flyer and say, oh.
Yeah, because there's so much that goes into them, and there's a right way and there's a wrong way to do them. You know, so it's and it's all subjective. It's all to people's opinions, you know.
Sure. And for me, even if you're throwing a birthday party for a 2-year-old or you're throwing a company retreat, there should still be some type of industry standard followed regardless, right? Like site check and things like that. And we'll get into all those things. But like even as simple as a site check, I see people like missing site checks, you know, or not checking out the venue prior to the event.
Yes, that's a key right there. And we'll dive into that. Those are things we need to dive into and explain to people.
Radio and television. Talk to somebody like a college professor that teaches radio and television to see how it's changed over the years, right? Radio and television, as you know, as we mentioned before, you know, Five has X amount of years in the industry, and so do I. I've worked in radio. He's, you know, hosted his own program. It's somewhat alive. Social media brought it back to life a little, but, you know, having somebody in here that's in the industry or teaches it.
Yes, that industry is experiencing a transformation right now.
For sure.
Going away from actual, you know, brick and mortar TV studios and things of that nature. The technology now allows so much more freedom. It allows so much more instant access, and just as far as something happens and you can adapt and be broadcasting live. I mean, even with the stuff that you're doing and in your community, being able to facilitate live events and live issues as they're happening, you know, as something's happening, you can be reporting live now. As something goes on and that happens, you can be the on-site expert for that thing. So,
and you don't need an antenna as big as a building, right? You could do it, like you said, just from your phone. When I was at the radio station, like, you know, they broadcasted live with audio, and then, you know, sometimes we tap into the board and do certain things to bring up the video a little bit better. But at the end of the day, I think it mixes with that interactive media a little bit, because radio, it's kind of a one-trick pony. Once you hear it, it's gone. Or TV, once it's there, it's gone, unless you dub it, right? So with the social media aspect of it, you're actually capturing that, and then you're able to, you know, look at it online, who's interacting with it. And the reason I like social media a lot is because it gives access to people with disabilities. There's a way around it, right? Oh, I can get it here. If I can't get it here, I can get it there. And it brings it back to life a little bit. I think social media gave radio a breath of fresh air, because most people were making their radio studios and retrofitting them to almost look like TV studios, and people were watching radio at one point, especially podcasts. Hello. All right, next, education. This is crazy right now, the education world. Five, how do you feel about having an educator in here, or education in general?
I mean, education is definitely a hot topic. Me growing up as a kid, I was never the, you know, a student, you know, A plus, you know, A student, but still, you know, education for kids, I feel like is paramount right now, especially with the missing those years during COVID.
Oh, yeah.
The COVID years were a little tough for kids. I have younger cousins and I have friends that have kids that are school aged, and, having them miss that time, not only learning, but also building, relationships and developing. So I feel as though education definitely is something that New Jersey needs to spend more resources and more time developing. And I know it's tricky and I know it's hard without getting super political, but your taxes and where you live, I know that affects a lot of what goes into your school systems. So, education is just something that we still need to pioneer and, fundraise for and advocate for.
I agree. For me, I've always said that the school system is so outdated. All right, it's a 200-year-old system, and the kids get off for summer for farming. Okay, that doesn't exist anymore. So they don't need to go home and take what they've learned in the classroom and then go use it on the farm anymore. So just by having that system in place, it's already outdated. But during those COVID years, I want to just touch in on a little bit. Like, you could take a 25-year-old and say, okay, go in front of your computer in the afternoon and we'll meet you for a meeting. But doing that with a 7-year-old and a 10-year-old, it might have not been the best idea. So, we'll talk to administrators or supervisors or whomever else we get in the building or in the studio to talk about maybe those COVID years and talk about education. And you're right, without getting too political, New Jersey is one of the highest taxed places in the United States, and most of our tax dollars, around 60% or so, go to education. And meanwhile, we're seeing schools closed left and right in less densely populated areas, and the more densely populated areas, schools are popping up left and right. You being a water guy, following the water resources, all our water is going to the inner cities too from the highlands. And what else do we have? We have first impressions. Most people have a decent reading on another individual with their first impression. About 7 seconds in, if you like that person or not. So, first impressions. Maybe we talk to somebody about first impressions.
First impressions are definitely very important. People, before they hear you speak, before they see or anything, first thing they do is see you when you walk into a room. Before they even understand you or get a chance to feel who you are as a person. I feel as though coming into a room and looking your best can never hurt.
For sure. Perception is everything, right?
It is. Perception is everything. There's no such thing as what did they say, a second first impression? So you always have to be, on your A game. And in the business world, that is definitely still stands true today.
100%. And I'm glad you mentioned the second first impressions, because my point of getting teaching licenses back in the day, even in 2015, 2016, to substitute teach, was to reestablish connections with my old community. Now, there's no reintroducing that first impression, but what it will do is allow me the opportunity, probably a longer period of time, but you have to almost reshape what people think about you. And you can, maybe it takes like a 10-year period or maybe less, but you can't just redo it next week, right?
Yes.
So that first impression, make sure you make a good one. However you display yourself will be remembered in people's minds. All right. So how about meetings? 5 sales meetings. You ever work somewhere and you had to do meetings? Are they important? How do you feel about meetings internally? We have so many meetings. We have our whole log mapped out, and it's been happening for months. And this is our first, actual studio session, but not our first meeting.
When you have a meeting, you definitely want to open a clear channel of communication.
For sure.
Clear channel of communication and understanding is the basis of every meeting. A meeting now doesn't necessarily have to be a place. A meeting just has to be essentially a time. With the technology that we have, ease of use. It's so easy to set up a Zoom meeting or even just a simple FaceTime, and so much can get accomplished and done miles apart. Accessibility to share ideas, to be able to collaborate, to be able to join together. It's really, really simple now. And I think still to this day, there are still rules. There are still best practices. There are still do's and don'ts, so being able to touch on those things will help some people out. In an age where we're so into our phones and we don't interact as much in a face-to-face, when we do have those face-to-face meetings, it's very much different than having a digital meeting.
We'll go over the do's and don'ts of meetings, but could you imagine like a sales company or a sales team not having meetings? How detrimental would that be? Because you have 4 salespeople and they're all going in the same territory. You know, hey, we're all working on the Johnson account. So it's like you got to communicate. I think that's the most important thing, whether it's good, bad, or indifferent. I know a lot of people take meetings as like, oh, this is a complaint session. You could take the complaints, but then come up with a solution. It's that simple, because if somebody's, presenting a problem without a solution, then they are complaining. But I think meetings are a great time for open space and like non-judgmental, solutions.
Essential for just conducting business. I mean, there's no way around it. You're going to have to meet with somebody. You're going to have to set a time and date and a place.
Got to do it. Your internal meetings, maybe on operations, housekeeping, day-to-day things, that's not to be confused with customer appointments, though. Planning and appointments. Now, this is different than meetings, right? Meetings are internal. We have our staff that we do what we do, but planning and appointments, this is more for the front end for the clients, right? The B2C people, the barbers, the salons, even the trades. I have an appointment. Now, how do you treat that appointment? Do you confirm that appointment? Do you follow up with that appointment? How important is that appointment for you? Do you have a cancellation fee? I see a lot of people doing cancellation fees now. So internal meetings are important, but the external appointments on what keep the money coming in are just as important.
Appointments are definitely important. Making appointments, being on time to those appointments, and also coming in with a plan when you have an appointment, I feel they're paramount. I feel like those are definitely important in all aspects of business. You have your meeting, then your next logical step would be making an appointment to follow up with that, to actually act on what you discussed in that meeting. Some people are great at having just the meetings, but that follow-up is definitely where you're going to really nail down your business and really be able to succeed.
100%. You could reschedule a meeting, right? Oh, instead of 3, we're going to meet at 4. You guys are all good with that? That's fine. But you don't necessarily want to do that with a client appointment, right? If that person has a haircut booked with you, they have a wedding tomorrow, and that's it.
That's it.
There's no more. And then guess what? You have other appointments that may not be as close as you, so you can't move everybody around. So the meetings, yeah, they're essential, but they could have some flex with them. Appointments should be a little bit more sensitive, more strict. Yeah, so one could say, for our purposes, appointment would be external and meetings would be internal. Right. So let's talk about something that's a little bit interactive media. How do you define, or what do you think of when you think interactive media, Five?
Interactive media, I feel like the media that is created is designed to be put out there. It's designed to be exposed to the masses. So it's designed to be consumed. And it's designed also to then tell a story of how can I now take this information and then put it back out into the world and do something with it. So the media has to be able to tell and create those type of stories in order for it, I feel like, to be as useful as it can be. There's a lot of stuff that we take in, and, like we're in that era where reality TV first came out, and it was crazy because it's just people doing things that we never saw being done in public on live TV, if you will. But now with the social media age, there's so much going on, there's so much happening. Some of this information is it's throwaway information. It's not actually being dispersed or being, serving an actual purpose other than entertainment.
Yeah.
So by having interactive media, we're hitting all the aspects of what media is meant to be, putting it together, and then having it out for clients to take, or, consumers to take, get a message or get a feeling, a takeaway from that. So
I agree, because one could say information without action is just entertainment, right? One could watch a movie, and what are you supposed to do when you watch a movie? Just consume it, and that's it. There's your information without action, right? But now if it's a live event like the ball drop, and it's scan this QR code on the screen and send us your story, and they're reading their story live on TV. Now you're interacting, right? So for me, I think interactive media can be more applied for like advertisements and events versus films and video productions. And you can use video production as an advertisement. That's just one form, though, because one could say a flyer is interactive media, right? I made this flyer. You're looking at it. You're interacting with it. You're scanning it, or you're doing whatever it is. AI. Oh, listen, AI, my quick perspective, and then I want to get yours, is I think AI should be used as a tool enhancement, not as like a crutch or to rely on.
AI is useful in many ways. And because of that usefulness, certain jobs have been downsized or some eliminated. But it is progress, and AI is a tool. It is not a end all be all. It's not for everything. It's not a perfect science, but AI is the future. I don't think it's going anywhere. I do think some of the things that they do with AI are really cool and really innovative. And I think some of the things that they're doing with AI are just for entertainment purposes. And I feel like there's going to come a time where there's going to be a border or a line that you don't cross with AI. So I think that right now AI is still the wild, wild west, but it's slowly developing and becoming more streamlined and more, I guess I would say, uniformed. And the more that happens, the more we'll kind of understand the guidelines and what we can make with it and what we can use it for and what's it good for, what's it not good for, without violating any, copyrights or, infringe on anybody's freedoms or, put out, harmful or hurtful things. So I think with the AI, I feel like we have started and it's going to continue to progress.
Agreed. And I like the fact that you said it's not going anywhere. And you know how we know it's not going anywhere is because, as I mentioned before, they're closing schools and yet opening data centers for AI, okay? Data centers, brick and mortar data centers are being put up left and right for AI, for the information, for all the data that comes in. I do think it could be detrimental to critical thinking, especially in young children. So it may be silly to say, but it may be not so silly to say that something like social media, alcohol, tobacco, AI, maybe they all should have a limit on when they can be accessed, right? At 16 years old, then you can start using AI. At 21 years old, then you can start using AI. Then you could also drink alcohol. So for me, I think that anything that alters the way you think should be restricted. Does that make sense?
Definitely. That definitely makes sense. In moderation.
In moderation. There's a time and place for everything, right, Five?
Yes.
Sales, the big one. Sales. I love sales. When I was working at the radio station, I wanted to come up with every fancy title in the world on what I was. But at the end of the day, I was a salesman. Have you ever been a salesman? And how do you feel about sales, Five?
I've been a salesman for many years. As I was developing my DJ career early on, I was in sales. I was in retail sales for many years. I was a retail store manager right out of high school. Family have owned retail businesses. So when it comes to sales, I feel like it's always been a part of what I am and what I do. And I feel like even though we shifted from a lot of brick and mortar stores and now we're doing this whole digital online stores, it's still the same thing. It's still a sale. It's still marketing. It's still advertising. It's still making sales. It's still pitching.
That's right.
I think that we've been used to a lot of the social media aspect of sales and now the AI aspect of sales, but there are still people that still enjoy a face-to-face interaction when it comes to sales. Are just changing and evolving, but the deals that are getting done still need to be done and made in order to have a healthy, flourishing economy.
I think so too. And sales is just relationship building, right? Relationship building and overcoming objectives. And just a tip out there, if you're not making sales for your organization, you better start. And as a salesman, you mentioned you're a salesman, you still sell for Omni. You have to be a salesman. I'm a salesman for CM Productions. That's how it works. We have to, generate that revenue and make the sale in order to keep going. That's what we have to do. And right along with sales, not only do we want to talk to a salesperson, but merchandising, right? The aspect of presenting it and branding and creating an idea and bringing it from production to sales. And how are we going to do that? Is it B2B? Is it B2C? So merchandising and buying, a huge topic, just right up there with sales. And we can definitely speak to somebody to see how they've adapted throughout the years. It kind of falls in that category. So, staying consistent and frequent with your message and whether it's clothing or uniforms or business cards or your website. Five. And we talked about websites. They're kind of, some are dying, some are still there. They're used for different purposes. So how do you feel about merchandising?
If I just, hand you, a hammer, or if I demonstrate you a hammer, it's different, yeah, you can still use it to bang in nails, but hey, if I'm merchandising this hammer and now I'm showing you how glamorous this hammer is and what it can do, and I'm showing you illustrations and videos of how you can use it, of course. But if I just hand it to you, it's like, oh, thanks, a hammer,
Yeah. It's like AI almost. You need to be prompted how to use it.
Yeah, but
little how to.
The merchandising, I kind of use the merchandising is kind of like the dressings on a window, like the curtains, what I'm saying? You just have a window, it still opens, it still closes, but the merchandising is kind of like icing on the cake, it kind of adds to your sales, your merchandising, your advertising, your marketing.
It's that curb appeal, right?
Yes, that's what is sometimes attract the eye candy to have customers come in and want to be more interested about what you do and how you can help.
And speaking of merchandising and branding and all that, how about media buying and how it's shifted so much? Basically back in the day, you say, well, I have a billboard, I have a newspaper ad, and I have either a TV or a radio ad. And it's not the same anymore, Five.
No, I mean, with the whole social media thing, I mean, yeah, we still do those traditional avenues of media buying. But even now, like content creators, man, they're making money off these social media posts and things like that. So just as simple as knowing who to contact or who to talk to get into that realm. If you have an influencer that's local and, they have locally 200,000 followers, 100,000 followers throughout, say, the tri-state area, and these are people that align with your clientele that you're trying to attract, yes, you can still do your billboards, you can still do your flyers, you can still do your radio ads. But if this person's going to put, a post together and you're going to collaborate, and that one post can go viral and get, 2,000 views, in a day or so, hey, you can maybe get a potential sale or two out of that, and it may be worth paying that influencer to represent you or, try your product or review your product. So,
and I think it doesn't just end with influencers, but I love the fact that you mentioned that, because social media, OTT, right, over the top, where it's like Netflix or Hulu, and you have these streaming platforms you can place ads on, and even like video games on people's phones. So just take into consideration that where you're spending your money might not be the best spot, or might not be where your customers are, right? And in a small business world, we got to count every dollar. So I've developed the fact that one has to be so crucial regarding their intake and their outreach, and you have to monitor it every month. And you definitely have to refine and retract what's working, what's not working, Five. And we'll definitely talk about that more with somebody that's in that industry, even though you and I are both in that industry, but maybe somebody that specifically specializes in media buying. And I would love to get somebody that's been doing it since like the 80s and see how it shifted,
Yeah.
That would definitely be neat. Media buying, networking, so important, so important. Five, you've networked your whole life. I've networked my whole life. How do you feel about having somebody in here that maybe can teach our audience a little thing or two about networking?
Networking is vital.
Essential to growth, I think.
It's essential to growth. It's the only way you're going to expand. The only thing we're going to grow. You want to increase your net worth, you have to network. So you have to go out there and talk to people. When I'm DJing, when I'm out at events where I'm there, of course, I'm taking business cards, I'm shaking hands, I'm having small conversations. And, after that, I'm doing my follow-up and reaching back out to those individuals. But when you're in a setting where there are people in your industry, or you're in a setting where, it's a place of business conducive to networking, you have to network. You have to want to be able to want to go out there and actively engage with other people in your industries and similar industries, and sometimes outside of your industry, and just tell them, hey, this is literally what I do. I want to know more about what you do. Networking is definitely not about what you know, essentially. It's more about who you know. And I think, the who's of your given industry are important, and knowing those who's will get you a lot farther than trying to do it all by yourself. Don't get caught up in all these internet gurus. Oh, I'm self-made. I did this. I blah, 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 bahs. And these guys, a lot of them are misrepresenting the fact that they indeed did network to get where they are.
Or have a team behind them.
Yes.
I find value in my connections, Five. I mean, there's money to be made everywhere, but money comes and goes, right? But the connections, they seem to stay forever. Hey, I need to borrow a BMW today. Hey, I need studio session today. Money can't always buy that.
No.
Money can't always buy that. And like you said, with the, influencer, or maybe that person that's starting out, and it's like, you're not going to be able to do it. I hate to say this, but doing it on your own, doing anything on your own is difficult.
Yeah, it is. Right? It is.
So, relying on just your equipment or YouTube or a self-help book can only get you so far. You got to talk to people. Organizational behavior, how one acts in the workplace. Maybe we talk to a psychologist about this. Maybe we talk to a therapist or somebody that determines, or studies human behavior. Organizational behavior, how people act in the workplace.
I think the workplace is definitely still a workplace. It's still a place to conduct business in a certain set of rules. And I think, to what you were saying earlier, knowing how to operate in those workplaces, knowing that this workplace is where we spend the majority of our time.
That's right.
If you think about it, we actually live at work and go home just to take a break in between.
It's true.
So you spend the most of your time with the people you work with, developing those relationships and working with those people. So I feel as though being mindful of how you conduct yourself in the workplace is essential, and also understanding the relationships and the hierarchy in a workplace, because it's great that everybody collaborates and everybody works together, but sometimes there has to be a chief, there has to be a boss, there has to be someone in charge. There has to be an appointed leader, and
not only appointed leader, but it's like a set standard of rules, right?
Correct.
You got to show up on time. You can't wear just any clothes. And it's not to set rules and parameters, but it's just to set like an industry standard. Yeah, and so people can work together respectively too. So, and you don't have to like somebody to work with them, right?
That's true. Everybody just has to know where they fit in. You get in where you fit in, knowing where you fit in, what you bring to the table, what it is that you're best at doing, and sometimes what you're best at doing, it may not be the job you're doing currently, but being able to adapt and learning to pick and choose and know when to fight your battles, and things of that nature. When you're in a business setting, it's a collaborative effort, with a lot of times people working together, but sometimes there is no collaboration. Sometimes things just need to get done.
That's right. Now let's talk about our next topic a little bit. The organizational behavior kind of ties into self-care. I think we touched on this a little bit, but keeping yourself healthy, whether it's aesthetically or physically or emotionally, so important, right?
Yes.
Self-care.
Like I said, as I just touched my hair, I shaved my head before I came in here. Before I came into this podcast today and shot this episode, I said I'm going to be on camera. I don't have a makeup team or anything. We're not like that fancy, but at least I shaved my head. I put on a clean shirt. I came in here looking the part. That's very, very important. Self-care is having a self-esteem for you, and caring about how you look helps you build that character up.
I agree.
Self-care is many things. Self-care is also understanding in a workplace you will be tired, you will be stressed, you will be frustrated, and you taking care of yourself, your mental health, your physical health, your emotional health, your financial health, all that is self-care. Being able to take a moment to sit in your vehicle before you go into that big meeting and decompress, or, get your mind right. And at the end of the day, decompressing and being able to have that USA moment before you go into the house to see your family. You need those type of things that are important to your self-care. Finding a hobby or something to release your stress, and understanding, what stresses you out, or having somebody to talk to about your stressors. With technology, like I said, there's apps now. There's what BetterHelp and all these other apps in here, and you can have the convenience of having a counselor or therapist, or it's just somebody to listen to over the phone.
And something that aligns with self-care and first impressions is your attire. I always say that location will drive attire, right? I don't care if I'm the media guy or if I'm the drink guy. If I'm going to the beach, you know how to dress, right? If I'm going to a funeral, you know how to dress. So the location will usually drive the attire. And how important is attire, Five, do you think?
Attire is everything. Like I said, I walk into a ballroom of 300 people. I did an event a couple weeks ago for 700 people. With that many eyes and looking at you, and all they see is you through the door, it's very important. When I get to my events, I may be dressed down. I may just have a company polo on or T-shirt. But, when it comes to showtime and lights are on, lights, camera, action, I am in a suit most of the time. If it's formal, a polo or a button down. If it's business casual, and if it is still casual, I am still in something probably logo or branded with my company on it. And I am wearing pants when I'm dressed down that don't have rips in them. I am wearing a sneaker or some type of shoe that may be dressed down, but is kind of toned down. It's not neon green. It's not neon orange.
You're going to be photographed.
Yeah, you're going to be photographed.
You're going to be photographed.
You're going to be photographed.
Yeah,
so,
you don't want to see on Facebook in 20 minutes that you were tagged in a post and you're like, oh no.
Yeah. Definitely. You know, when they say wear a tuxedo, don't go get a T-shirt with the tuxedo print on it. Like, no, actually get a tuxedo if that's what that event calls for.
Yeah,
You
location
know,
will drive attire,
yes.
brother.
So making sure you have the attire and using the resources out there. You know, I'm a Temu guy. I'm a Marshalls guy. I'm a TJ Maxx guy. You know, I'm a Macy's backstage guy. You know what I'm saying?
Absolutely.
Walmart, Kohl's. Like, I don't have to get name brand. I don't have to have Gucci to go do an event. You know, but I just need to make sure that I'm in that set attire for what that event calls for.
I mean, shoot, go in your grandpa's closet, dude. Right? Go in your father's closet, your uncle's closet, and just dress the part. And nobody knows or asks you where it came from. And, you know, we'll talk about that more. I think we should have a suit salesman in here. That would be great for that.
Definitely. I definitely know those because
there you go. Men's Warehouse or something. We'll give them a plug.
Definitely.
So let's talk about noise, though, because I could be dressed the part. I could be ready. I can have everything on point, my infrastructure, my capital, my resources, the talent. Everything's here, Five. And now all of a sudden I got noise in my ear. Whether it's the lawnmower outside or the client's sister, whatever, some type of noise, and you're like, oh no, here we go. Noise and distractions are huge topics that people, I think, they don't really recognize sometimes, and they don't consider what may be noise actually noise. You know, whether it's you're working from home and your baby's crying, or you're working at work and your employee's bothering you, whatever, or you're working from home and the garbage man's outside, right? So noise is noise. What type of noise? We could definitely talk to somebody maybe that runs a studio for that, a yoga studio or something that stays quiet, or even a recording studio, because noise can definitely interfere with that.
We're in a noisy time in the world.
Yes.
So there's so much noise out there. There's so much misinformation and fake news and all of these things, social media and clickbait and all this stuff.
I would call all that noise.
Yes. So being able to separate yourself from noise will help you, whether that's, like I said, having an USA before you go into the house, turning your phone off or muting your phone at a certain time, having a social media break where you're just off of all socials.
How about a tech-free zone in your house?
Tech-free zone. No phones at the dinner table. You know, I've been taking a lot of time away from the phone in days where I don't have to work, where I'm not necessarily being as accessible to people as some people may like. And, you know, setting those boundaries is very important. You know, setting the boundaries, whether it's professional, whether it's with clients, whether it's personal, family members, friends, whatever, you still have to be able to take that time to yourself.
I think the biggest problem, Five, was that it's not the internet. I think we talked about the access to the internet, right? Which could also cause burnout, right? If you never put the phone down, if you never put the iPad down or the watch down or the laptop down or the notebook down, I can go on, obviously, right? If you never put it all down, oh, I'm at dinner, but I hold on, I got my AirPods in. Let me answer this call real quick. You know, and you put your AirPod in, it never stops, right? You can eventually be burnt out. So somebody says, oh, well, you got to have a good balance between work and personal. And somebody may argue, well, mine's 70-30, mine's 80-20. And whatever your happy medium is your thing, right? Your happy median, whatever yours is fine. But eventually, one portion of your life, whether it's family, your vehicle, career, hobbies, something is going to either burn out or fizzle out, not on purpose, just because of maybe how much distraction or how much noise or how much is going on. So burnout, what do you think about that, Five?
You know, burnout is real. You know,
what does it look like, though?
Burnout could be you burnt out. Like, look, I'm in a room and it's dark and I'm on my couch and, you know, I need rest. I need peace, quiet.
That seems like an extreme,
burnout,
right?
Yeah, burnout would be the extreme. The burnout those symptoms mirror depression, you know? That could be burnout. Burnout could be rage. Burnout could be lashing out at family members and friends and coworkers and being enraged and being angry and being, you know, violent. Burnout can just be what they call quiet quitting, where you just show up to work and just do your job and that's it. You don't interact. You do your job. You put your head down. You clock in. You clock out. And you go home.
Because at that point, you're burnt with a T.
Yeah,
you're burnt. You're done, dude. You're there, done, but you're not there.
So with that being said, you know, burnout is unavoidable at sometimes, but it can be manageable.
Love it. And I think talking to a travel agent on burnout or somebody that helps people plan vacations might be a good idea.
Yes, take a vacation. Sometimes you need to get outside the environment that you're always into. You know, you turn into like a fish in an aquarium. You know. you're always in like your same tank and you're always swimming around in the same circle, like Finding Nemo, just keep swimming, keep swimming, keep swimming. But sometimes you're like, yo, man, I want to take a break. I want to take a break. You know,
agree.
like when can I not swim? When can I, if I can swim this way, why can't I just swim the other way the next time? So that burnout is just you changing directions to avoid burnout sometimes, taking a break to avoid that burnout.
And I think of, changing directions is most important because I've mentioned this to my family before, and I mentioned this with one of my new clients. Like, you don't necessarily need to leave your environment to have a vacation, right? In Jersey, we're big on, we're going down to Florida. We're going down to North Carolina during the summer. Meanwhile, this is the only time that it's warm here. So it doesn't really make sense to me that people leave Jersey when it's warm, right? So how important is a staycation? 5, I'm telling my family, like, holy cow. We never stop even to say hello to each other or sit on the couch for 5 minutes with each other. So could you imagine a week of just sitting on your porch? You don't need to go to Wildwood, New Jersey, even though it's beautiful, but you can sit on your own porch for a week and soak it in. Because how many times do we get up and you get up, you make coffee, you pack your lunch, you go to work. You've never even sat on your couch.
Yes.
You bought it, you've never even sat on your own couch, dude.
Yeah, no, definitely. I had to do an event as a recent, and me and my father did the event together.
Yeah, shout out to your pops.
Yeah, shout out to my pops, man, definitely.
Yeah,
and,
for sure.
We did this event, and the event called for us to travel, still within the state of New Jersey, but farther down New Jersey. It could be a couple hours away.
Sure.
So with us having to do all of the equipment moving and all of the, itinerary and everything else that had to go with it, it called for us to have a hotel room. So, but we're in Atlantic City. Atlantic City is, place people go to gamble, relax.
Sure.
A little retreat. So we'd already had our room paid for our event. And I was just like, when we come out here next year, let's just extend it. Let's go the day before. Let's go the day after. Take that time and just use that time to help us avoid that burnout, because this is a 2-day event, and why not make it 4? Why not take those extra 2 days and make it a weekend, 4-day weekend, and be able to sit down, relax, and bond. So me being able to try to incorporate those little areas of rest, relaxation, change of pace is very important.
Sounds like a sound strategy to me, if you were to ask. So that's the type of stuff you'll get from us, from Curtis Mack and DJ 525, along with other industry professionals. We'll try to share the do's and don'ts of that particular industry and maybe some industry secrets or some industry tips that will help individuals that are maybe even in it or trying to get in it, and it being the industry, and help them along the way. So we really appreciate your time. Thanks for listening. This is Curtis Mack.
DJ 525.
We hope that you join us for our interviews with the industry professionals that we plan on having. If you want to be included in an episode of the podcast, feel free to reach out to 525 or me at any time on any platform. Just don't burn us out, okay?